For all of you that were able to join for day one, welcome back. And for those of you that this is your first day, welcome. Day one was, I would call it a great success. And we got to hear a lot about the water management tools that are used. And today we'll be focusing more on the weather forecasting decision support tools. I'm Julie Kalansky, I'm from CW3E, and I will be facilitating this meeting. The effort, the decision support tools has really been led by Chris Delaney, Roger Putty, and Kalansky. And so I just want to make sure that to acknowledge them for all their work in putting this together and this effort, the whole effort, the evaluation of the decision support tools. For today, we will have the agenda, as I mentioned, will be focused on weather forecasting tools. We have one framing session after the opening remarks, and then 3 sessions that focus on the weather forecasting situational awareness tools, and then some wrap up at the end. And as I mentioned, our decision support tools working group leads are Kalansky from DWR and Roger Putty from GEI and Chris Delaney from Sonoma Water. And you'll be hearing from them throughout the day, especially in terms of, talking about the objectives for this working group and the symposium, and then a lot of the wrap up at the end. And here is the first part of the session before our break, the introductions and the symposium overview. And then this framing session that Duncan and Cisa from CW3E will be talking about. And then we'll jump into some atmospheric river tools. After the break, there will be some more weather related tools and then hydrologic tools. And then we'll wrap up this afternoon, or not quite this afternoon, late morning, with the wrap up and thinking about next steps for this working group as part of the Yuba-Feather overall project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Romy to talk about some of the housekeeping items for today and how to use the Zoom. So Romy, do you want to go ahead and explain how we're going to be using Zoom in the chat for today?
Thanks, Julie. So as you logged on today, you should have been muted and your video off. At the bottom for the chat, we're using the chat for any questions or comments during the meeting or any issues you may have, which I'll be monitoring. And then under reactions, you can actually raise your hand if you would like to say your question. You will be called on before asking to unmute and asking your question. And then on the top right, if you would like to view the presentation differently, you can choose how you want to see it. And as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded.
Great, thanks, Romy. And just as a note, one of the reasons we're recording this meeting is as we're presenting some of these decision support tools, we thought this would be a great opportunity to get videos of explaining through and walking through how the decision support tools work, and then potentially being able to use those for education or for others that can't make today for how to illustrate how the decision support tools work. And then as we did yesterday, on Tuesday, we're also going to be using Mentimeter. So I'll turn it over to Chad to talk about Mentimeter and how we're going to be using it today.
Thanks, Julie. So yeah, one of the ways that we kind of collected some feedback and got people's opinions and thoughts on some of the tools and the process on Tuesday was using Mentimeter, which is, if you were on the call on Tuesday, we kind of saw how it worked, but if you weren't, it's just a platform that allows you to go and answer questions and type your answers or your feedback into the website, and it shows up on the screen. And we can collect that information and use it for ways to move forward or just kind of just brainstorming sessions. So one way to get to the website, you can either do it on the desktop that you're on or your computer, or you can do it on your phone. You can type in the menti.com and enter the code on the right here. or you can on your phone use the QR code, and it'll take you to this website, and it'll allow you to answer the questions that we project onto the screen. And we are going to use Menti a little bit different today than we used it on Tuesday, and I'll get into that in a second. But just to kind of test and make sure that it's working and kind of show you how it works in case you need a refresher or you weren't here on Tuesday, it essentially works like this. So the first question that we're going to ask today, I know on Tuesday we got everybody's opinion on who they thought was going to win the World Series. But today, in the spirit of the season, we're asking, what is everyone's favorite Halloween candy? And your answers will show up on the screen, and we'll be able to see if there's a commonality between everybody in the audience based on what you would like to receive as you're trick-or-treating. So it looks like Reese's is out to a quick lead. One other thing is I will put the link into the chat, so you don't have to necessarily type in the domain name and enter the code. It will just take you right to where we're at in the Mentimeter. So as you see, everybody's answers do kind of pop up on the screen. We get to see, it's just an interactive way for people to kind of put their thoughts and answers to the questions on the screen, and allows for an interactive kind of brainstorming session in a way. So with that, we have several answers for Reese's, which is a fairly popular Halloween candy. We have some candy corn or one candy corn, which is, you know, some people hate it, some people love it. We have Twix and a fairly large variety of favorite Halloween candies. So with that, we are going to use Mentimeter a little bit differently today, and that's mostly during the Q&A session. At the end of each individual session, we're going to ask a fairly similar question, and I'll put the link to the Mentimeter in the chat after each session, so there's an easy way to get to it. But we're essentially going to ask kind of how can each of these tools be incorporated in the Yuba-Feather FIRO. So this is an example for session 2B. So this will be essentially entered during the Q&A session. As there is a discussion, this is just a way for people to potentially enter some of their thoughts or maybe their opinions or their thoughts on ways in which we might be able to improve some of these tools, or how we can get them into the Yuba-Feather FIRO operations. So there will be a slide for each session. So this is the example of atmospheric river tools. And then we will kind of loop back during the overall interactive session at the end of the day or in the late afternoon, kind of just summarizing, see if there's commonalities or just ways in which we can improve the tools or make them useful for the Yuba-Feather operations. So as I mentioned, I'll enter the Menti link into the chat after each session, so it'll be easy for you to get to the website. And then at the end of the day, we will summarize some of these answers. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Julie, and let whoever needs to share their screen.
Great, thanks, Chad. And I'll just make a reminder when we turn to the discussion topics too about the Menti. So now that we finished our going over the agenda and the housekeeping items, we're going to start our opening remarks. And so I will introduce Tracy Pettit and Mike Anderson. Tracy is a manager for the Water Management Branch within the State Water Project Operations Control Office. Tracy has worked within the State Water Project Operations since 2001, but within the Department of Water Resources for over 25 years in 2 different divisions, Operations and Maintenance and the Division of Safety of Dams. Tracy has had her current position since 2009. She is responsible for managing the water operations of the State Water Project in coordination with the Central Valley Project, while complying with the regulatory requirements and contractual obligations. This includes operating Lake Oroville for water supply and flood control, scheduling the Delta exports, and developing the annual water allocation forecast used to assess the amount of water available for the delivery to the State Water Project contractors. Tracy, thank you for that. That's a lot. I'm very appreciative of it. And Mike Anderson is a state climatologist for California, a collaborative position between the state and NOAA to provide climate data services for California. He also manages the state's atmospheric river research program. Thank you, Mike. So Tracy, I will turn it over to you to talk about the purpose and objectives for the symposium today.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So the purpose of the symposium is to support the decision support team gap analysis. These are how the current decision support tools, how they identify how they meet the decision maker needs, and are there any needs unmet. So that's the purpose of this symposium. The objectives of this symposium are to present the information about the existing and the emerging decision support tools and exchange knowledge, which we did through Orville, through Yuba and the U.S. Army Corps. It's also to discuss how these tools help with the decision makers in the Yuba-Feather watershed and how they can support the FIRO objectives. It's also to illustrate where the existing and emerging tools fit into the decision-making process, what their role is and how they provide information or input or how they receive it. The last objective is to identify these gaps in the tools in the decision-making process. So this decision support tool, the data gaps analysis feeds into the preliminary viability assessment. So the decision support tool work group is one of 9 teams that feed into this preliminary viability assessment. And so it is the efforts of the work group are cross-cutting. It addresses the gaps to improve these tools in support of the FIRO, and also it's a proactive effort. And as you can see, they all feed into the various work teams and how they feed into the preliminary viability assessment. That's it.
Thanks, Tracy. Good morning, everybody. This is Roger Putty, and I'll take a minute now to update everybody on the kind of the pathway that the DST work group has followed. And welcome back to those that joined us on Tuesday. This might look familiar to you, and for those that are joining us for the first time today, welcome as well. So yeah, as Tracy mentioned, we've this DST work group, which formed along with the other work groups involved in the FIRO PVA effort earlier in this year, and we began to organize ourselves and identify what our mission and articulated that in a charter and what our alignment was with the PVA itself. And through the process of numerous work group meetings and joint meetings with other work groups and then just small group meetings, we've embarked on this process to understand the landscape better of the decision support tools that have been used and or may be used to facilitate developing FIRO in the Yuba-Feather watershed. And so we've been gathering a lot of information, and thanks to all the subject matter experts and decision makers and others out there in this community, we've got a great inventory of tools and documentation, and it's really the subject matter experts and the users that are making this symposium happen today with all of our help to put it forward. So thanks to everybody for that. As we move forward, we're now at this symposium today, and again, as Tracy mentioned, we're intending to increase the awareness and explain the use of these tools and begin to better understand the gaps that may exist in being able to make the kinds of decisions that the different organizations that are responsible for using FIRO in the Yuba-Feather watershed will have. Moving forward into next year, we'll take what we've learned from this process today and begin to summarize the information. We know that we don't know everything about what we don't know. We will begin to identify additional gaps as we talk with all of you And it'll become clear also as we design the FIRO alternatives together, what those potential additional needs might be. We'll take all this information and prioritize it and begin to document it and into what we think of as a priority action plan that will address the DST gaps. And we anticipate there may be, future assessments, potentially additional meetings that we all may need to have to discuss what those additional needs are. And as we move into 2023 and 2024, the more specifics come for supporting the final viability assessment and completing the development of the DSTs and the various enhancements. So we have a come a long way so far, but we have a good path ahead of us. So looking forward to working with you all. I think we have Mike Anderson that is going to try and join us. He was in transition.
I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
I
Mike.
made it.
Awesome.
Back home. All righty. Well, with a nod to Doc Brown there up in the corner, we'll do our best here. So changes afoot. We're in an exciting world where our water management paradigm is having to adapt. Warming world, changing the way water shows up. And not only that, but we're changing the number of uses and requirements we have on our infrastructure to deliver water. If you think about the number of objectives that were in place when the project started versus how many are in place now, that alone is staggering. Throw in the complexities of a more variable system that was already quite variable to start with, and you really end up in an exciting place. So what I did was I realized that, well, for real-time water management, where you want to maximize the benefit, minimize the hazard of each and every hydrograph, you need time. And so as I was putting together my graphic, maybe it was a good thing I was watching Back to the Future at the same time, or maybe not, but kind of looks to me like a flux capacitor, which would enable time travel in the Back to the Future movies. And it has three pieces, or at least mine does. Have observations, forecasts, and those decision support tools and services. And you can see on the screen there all the links. The observations got everything from our ground-based sensors to airborne satellite, radar systems, all get us fantastic amounts of information. But by themselves, it's just a whole bunch of numbers. You really have to curate that data into graphics that help you understand, or assimilate it into models that can help you forecast ahead. And the forecasts are fantastic, but again, if you don't have the ability to translate it into what it means for water management, well, it sounds cool, but it's not really useful. And that's where the decision support services come in. It's taking that fantastic information and turning it into something useful in water management. And that's what we're hoping to do with this effort. And I think the Yuba-Feather is a fantastic system because you have all the complexity that California has to endure right here in one project. So great that we got our feet wet with a few practice rounds, but here's the main event. As we keep moving forward, as you see there, the fuel, where the fuel rod goes, hopefully not nuclear fuel, but it's that AR research partners that help bring those new ideas to life, and we get them plugged in so that we can get the job done. So looking forward to seeing what you all have today. Hopefully I can attend for as long as possible before the next adventure in this fantastic drought that we're going through calls my attention away. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to thank Tracy, you and Mike for those opening remarks, and then turn it back over to you and Chris for the recap from day one. So go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tracy and Mike, and very timely and appropriate comments for this theme of today. We wanted to just spend a minute recapping what we discussed on day one as we transition into this discussion on day two, and also just some of the things that we heard from day one to help kind of frame the discussion for today. So many of you that joined us on day one, you learned that our focus on that day was on the real-time reservoir operation decision support tools, and that was at a system-wide and watershed-specific level. Today, we're going to be going down into the details of the different situational awareness tools and forecasting tools that inform those decision support system tools. We spent some time getting some good comments and commentary on the kind of vision and framing of why it's important that these tools be available for supporting FIRO and the decisions that are made under that paradigm. What makes up these systems and the potential concepts and the way they could be integrated. And there were some great takeaways from those discussions about our path moving forward in terms of what questions we should be asking and how we can help ensure that the objectives are being met for using FIRO. We focused in on the current state of the watershed system tools. There's already been some tools in place, as many of you know, used in the Feather River system. We want to leverage that experience and also on the specific watersheds, there's an extensive set of tools that are used by the operators to not only manage large flood events, but also water management throughout the year. So really interesting context to have there in terms of on the ground analysis that occurs within those watersheds. And then we had a good interactive session where we got additional information about what's important to FIRO and what tools are most useful. And Chris is going to give us some highlights on that discussion. Chris?
All right, good morning. Thanks, Roger. So I'm Chris Delaney. I'm one of the co-leads for the DST group. And as Chad mentioned, we use this Mentimeter to help us with the interactive session at the end of day one. So that interactive session had two questions. The first question is, what do you think is the most important FIRO decision support need? We got a lot of answers, but here we sort of just lumped them into categories. So the first category is quantify forecast uncertainty and possible range of outcomes. And there in parentheses is the number of comments that fell within that category. So here, that got the most number of votes of 5. The next we saw was increased forecast skill for wet events. So that was next down, we've got 4 on that. And then interagency coordination, which we know is very important for the system, given the coordination of releases for flows of confluence. So that received 3. And then understanding of forecast skill and reliability and how it affects FIRO. There we got 2 comments. And then finally, forecast scale and timing of near-term AR strikes as well received 2 comments. And this question sort of led into a discussion that I'd say would cross-cut over multiple categories, and that is just how the current forecast skill can help inform, how far you draw down the reservoir in advance of events, which is, the ability to do that as a function of multiple things, forecast skill, and then as well our release constraints for the reservoir. So definitely led to some interesting discussion. All right, next slide. All right, so question 2 was, based on the needs of the reservoir operators, what forecast tools or products may be most useful to aid operator decisions? So here we got a more variety of responses, but I've summarized 6 of those here. So two we received was the FCO DSS, which is currently in place. The next was ensemble inflow forecast. So that received to as well. And then another one was scheduled releases from other reservoirs. So this is reservoirs besides Oroville and New Bullards Bar. Here again, we received 2 comments there. And then downstream flow forecasts for flow regulation from the reservoirs. There is 2 comments. And then here again, we saw a comment on AR landfall predictability. We also received a few comments on that for the first question. And then the last one I just included, it was the lone comment, but I thought it was pretty profound, and that's just the internet, because FIRO, really relies on, the exchange of information in order to inform real-time operations. So we can thank Al Gore for that one.